I'm Darren Lutton from FBTV and welcome to Big Moments in Football Brisbane history. Today we're trying to find out, where was the first football kicked in Brisbane? We've enlisted the help of football historian Peter Eedy to guide us through the early years.
Brisbane was enjoying an economic boom in the 1880s, so there were a lot of migrants who came. At the start of the 1880s there were about 30-odd thousand people. By the end of the 1880s there were nearly 100,000. A lot of those immigrants were from England, Scotland, Wales, and the players who first came here to start playing association football were at the time referred to as Scotch rulers, and there are lots of references to the Glasgow Football Club, so it says to me they were probably mostly Scottish. In May 1884 they held a meeting at the Australian Hotel, which interestingly the building is still there. I was really surprised to find it's on the corner of Queen and Albert Street, diagonally opposite the Hungry Jack's. So it was lovely to find that, but they've stripped all the beautiful old verandas off it. Anyway, they met there in the 1st of May, had a meeting, decided let's form the Anglo-Queensland Football Association, AQFA, and commence a fixture competition. And one of the prime movers was a fellow called Macready, who apparently had been a Glasgow Park Rangers player. I inquired with Glasgow Park Rangers about whether they knew anything of the fellow, but they said no, their records from that time were a bit skinny. And he said they also contained a lot of nicknames, so it was a bit hard to tell who was who, which was a bit unfortunate. But anyway, Macready and his associates, they formed 2 new clubs just amongst themselves, and they call one Queen's Park, or Queen's Park Glasgow, or Queen's Park here, and the other one was St Andrews. And then the Rangers team, they decided to throw their lot in with them, and then they had a 3-team competition.
We're here at Raymond Park at Kangaroo Point. Behind me is where the Kangaroo Point Rovers play their home games. To the other side here is the Pineapple Hotel. We're actually standing on sacred ground. This is where the first game was played.
The first match played at the Pineapple Sports Ground, Raymond Park, the spiritual home of football in Brisbane, in my view. And unfortunately, St Andrews was just way too good for Queen's Park and beat them 7-0.
There's a plaque at the rear bar of the hotel commemorating the event.
The season was relatively short. The first match 7th of June, the last match I think was early August, which was called the final tie between the 2 leading teams, who were Rangers and St Andrews, was played here. They had charity boxes at the gates for donations to the local hospital, and Rangers won 1-0 and won the so-called badges, which I've since learned are a lovely little gold cross about that big.
This is certainly where the first organised match was played, but there must have been practice matches prior.
Anyway, as far as we can ascertain, the records are a bit scant, but it appears that in 1883 a group of players, probably led by a fellow called Andrew Rankin, set up the Rangers Football Club. Now, whether they were the remnants of the old Rangers rugby club that had disappeared in the late 70s, not sure, can't tell, records aren't available. But in 1883 they started playing here, scratch matches.
It could have been here at the Botanic Gardens, which back in the 1880s was called Queen's Park. This could be where the first game was played. Today the original gates mark the entrance to the gardens, and the majority of the field space remains. The playing area was characterised by mosquito-ridden bamboo at one end and the Brisbane River at the other.
But of course 1883 was a pivotal year because the Northern Rugby Union was starting to form, the Aussie rules players were still here, so you had 3 football codes and the cricketers all vying for space here. With
Melbourne rules, rugby union and sometimes cricketers all playing at Queen's Park at the same time, something had to give. So the football people looked for a new place to train and practice. So they came here. We're now at the site of QPAC. The field would be set up by bringing 2 poles and a piece of tape, and they would use that to set up their goals. The balls would have been pretty similar to this, made of all leather and very heavy when it gets wet. And this piece of land got extremely wet whenever it rained. It can't have been the site at QPAC, but the site at Queen's Park has to be it, right? We're here at Wacol. And in the 1870s, the Brisbane Club, which was the only football club in Brisbane, accepted an invitation from Doctors Webb and Drysdale to come to the Wooga Road Lunatic Asylum and play a series of games against the wardens and the patients. They would play 5 or 6 games during the season. Majority of the time, they played Melbourne rules, AFL. But during their 4th game, they played a game without the use of arms. The posts didn't have a crossbar. They had goalkeepers, but they played a game without the use of arms. Now that's a game of football. This is where the first ball was kicked.
If that was a London Association game, that's the first known soccer game played in Australia. Previously, people referred to the 1880 game played when John Walter Fletcher organised a game in Sydney, but some historians think the 75 game was really the one.
There you have it, the 7th of August 1875. Not only the first football kicked in Brisbane, but the first in Australia, at a lunatic asylum where the wildlife run free. Which just goes to show, you don't have to be crazy to play the game, but it sure helps.